The reality we live in can be a very strange place. Most of the time, fact being stranger than fiction. How will we ever start to understand this reality we live in unless we question everything? Join me and a guest as we unravel the mysteries of this reality, one topic at a time. This is Inquiries of Our Reality with Shayn Jones.
What is up, Inquirers, and welcome to the expanse of deep, open-minded conversation. I'm the one they call Shane, and today for you guys, we are diving back into the deep philosophical and psychological aspects of the Pillars of Wisdom with the fascinating Vito. And this is going to be part 2 of hopefully many episodes. So if you guys didn't catch the first one, make sure you guys go back and check out that first one to get a little bit more context for this episode. But as we go farther in, we're going to be diving deeper and deeper into the concepts within this book. So hopefully you guys are sticking around for it, and hopefully you guys enjoy it, because I've definitely been thoroughly enjoying diving into a lot of psychology and philosophy again lately. It's kind of been one of my main things of fascination lately. So hopefully you guys are with me for the ride, because of course, as this show goes, we inquire about different things in our reality, but always have an interesting mix along the way. But before we get into the show today, we of course have a couple of quick news and updates. I'm sure you guys are getting sick and tired of me saying it, so I'm going to try to make this quick and easy. The next live episode of Bizarre Inquiries will be happening on May 1st at 7:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Open Minds Media YouTube. And if anybody has any clips, articles, questions, or anything that they would like to submit for that, make sure you guys get it to us before then. If not, we will definitely use it on a future episode. And more information on that, of course, will be given out the day of, all that kind of stuff as we get closer to the live date. But if you guys just want to make it quick and easy on yourselves so you guys don't have to worry about keeping up on all that, when you guys go and follow the Open Minds Media YouTube page, make sure you guys hit the bell notification up in the corner. And then anytime we go live, you guys will get a notification, and you guys will be notified. And you guys will be able to hop into the live. And of course, going into the next thing, if you didn't catch it on the last 2 episodes, the live schedules for the week for Inquiries of Our Reality and Bizarre Encounters will be posted in the beginning of the week on all social media pages, always subject to change. And hopefully I will end up doing posts the day of. But if I don't get to it, you guys will always have that schedule in the beginning of the week. And of course, like I mentioned with that notification bell, anytime we go live, you guys will be aware of it, and you guys don't even have to worry about that schedule. And if anybody also didn't catch on the last 2 episodes, the Open Minds Media Patreon is under construction. I'm going to keep this short and simple. If you guys are current members, hopefully you guys are sticking with us for the time being. But if you guys are future members, give us about a month or so, and we'll have a lot of new stuff coming down the pipeline. And of course, I will make sure that I let you guys know as that stuff starts rolling out. A lot of new exciting stuff. Hopefully you guys are just as excited about it as I am. And the last thing before we get into the show, if anyone is interested in being a guest on the show, sharing their experiences or encounters, or contacting me for any reason whatsoever, you guys can do so through email, which is inquiriesofourrealitypodcast@outlook.com, or you guys can call or text the Open Minds Media hotline, and that number is 313-364-1551. And if you guys didn't catch that number, it is available down in the show notes. And every single thing that I did mention and will mention throughout the show is also available in the link tree, which is also available down in the show notes. And with that, let's get into the show. Please welcome back to the show, for now his second return, Vito from Mystic Visions. How's it going today, man?
Hey, man. Thanks for having me again. Pleasure to talk to you last time. Hopefully this time again.
I was going to say, man, at least now I kind of know the pace of what we're going into, because I know last time introductions sometimes are a little bit awkward and stuff before you kind of get a feel for each other. But now that I know we're going to be diving into like philosophy, psychology, all that stuff, I'm already in the right mindset for it, man. So hopefully it'll be a little bit smoother than last time. And now we've had a little bit of talking on the in-between. You were kind enough to send me a copy of this book that I could skim through a bit. So I'm looking forward to what we're going to end up diving into today, of course.
Yeah, me too. It'll be great.
So a quick spot before we end up getting into what we're going to dive into today. And for anybody that hasn't caught it already, this is going to be somewhat of a continuation off of the last time that you were on the show. But in case anybody didn't happen to listen to the first episode, or maybe they have to listen to this episode to get interested to go back and listen to the first episode. For anybody that may not be familiar with who you are, what you do, what Mystic Visions is, and even what the Pillars of Wisdom are, I want you to kind of give them a brief introduction before we get into it.
Yeah, so I'm Vito from Mystic Visions, and we wrote The Pillars of Wisdom, right, which is a book on spirituality, economics, and psychoanalysis, and also basically talks about the entire story and how we went from the manosphere into these other topics to discuss our modern times, right? My specific role in the company is basically I do all kinds of stuff. I teach people the stuff that's in there. I come on podcasts, talk to people like you. And I'm also a co-writer and researcher in the company, right? So a lot of the theory is so dense, you need different books to read, and it takes a lot of power to do that. So that's kind of like what I do. I read different books all at once, research, take out the best parts, and then send them to the main author of the book, and he just compiles it into an article, right? So that's what I do.
Group effort collecting psychology and philosophy, man. Especially when you guys start diving into, you guys kind of got a mix of some of these like new concepts kind of mixed with some of these old concepts. So when you're diving into some of the old concepts, it's one of those things that if you want to do just to the research, you have to like research across different civilizations and philosophies to see kind of where the correlating lines are, what things seem to be in common between everything. Like, I don't think people realize like the extent that goes into writing a research book. Like, just writing a fiction book is hard enough, but when you're doing a research book and you want to make sure that you're precise with all your information, like more often than not, like there's always ghostwriters involved. There's always other people involved. Like there's just so much information that you compile that you got to do it as a group effort, man.
Yeah, it takes a lot of hours. Sometimes I sit for weeks just reading 3-4 books at once, trying to get the right information out of them, because you could use ChatGPT, whatever, to sort of like get a summary, but it's never good enough, right? It's not in depth enough, and so it always takes human labor power to really get the good stuff out of things. And this is one of them where I sit for weeks, read 4 different books, take out the good stuff, compile it into something, and then send it to someone to turn it into an article, right? Yeah, like that.
So I know that you got some stuff you want to dive into today. I know that you mentioned before that all the concepts that we're talking about kind of play into each other a bit. So if anybody didn't happen to catch the last episode, if you want to kind of bring them up to speed real quick, and then we can end up hopping into what you want to get into today.
Right. So the last episode was about the goofy schmoofy, which is a symptom. Really, it's a symptom of our today's economy and cultural structure. And a goofy schmoofy is just someone who purposefully fails to feel good about himself, right? And there's a whole cycle that's involved in this. I'm sure you had your friend, a family member, a manager, a boss who was not that serious, and who basically, when you'd give him a task, when you'd ask for a favor, and he for some reason would fail so badly, you think to yourself, how is that even possible? Or that one guy who was keeping a money ledger on the stuff that he purchased for an entire party and then asked everyone to pay him back, right? Like a pizza that cost $10. talking from
But it's
personal
split
experience.
5 ways. So I need $2 from everybody, please.
Yeah, because I bought that pizza, so it's only fair that you guys pay me for this $10 pizza.
Extra
please.
work, actually. That's going to be $2.25 so that my part's paid for.
Yeah, but that's the part I don't talk about. It's just like a hidden fee that you'll figure out over time. So we'll just keep it like on the down low, just ignore it, you know. You ended up paying me $20 instead, but whatever, who cares, you know?
Money's flimsy, except for when it comes to their pocket.
Listen,
That's how that goes.
it's
You know?
inflation, economy, all that stuff.
I don't know, maybe like $15 or so. I don't know the exact number.
Do you know how much pizza costs nowadays? It's expensive.
How much do I owe you, though? Oh, you owe me $2.21. How much do I owe you? I don't know, maybe like 15, 18 something. I don't know, something in that range.
so that friend, right? There's that kind of friend who is like always, he's just a goof. He's a goof. And it's clear he's a goof. Like you take him to a party that's full of women, and then he's the kind of guy that's like saying awkward stuff to women and trying to get all the attention to himself. And you're like, okay, dude, we get it. Your mom didn't love you enough as a child, and now you're trying to get that from other people. It's fine. Just all that stuff. Basically, your classic friend who is just a narcissist and only thinks about himself, right? That's a goofish movie. And today, what I want to talk about is, well, how is a goofish movie created? How do these things happen, right? And the goofish movie is just symptomatic of the economy that we live in, especially the economic structure, right? Which is basically today's topic, right? And so today, I want to talk about Keynesian economics, which is basically what we're experiencing right now.
Hold on tight, guys. We'll be right back after this brief commercial break. But in the meantime, don't forget to follow Inquiries of Our Reality on Instagram and Facebook. And don't forget to check out Open Minds Media on YouTube and TikTok. I'd love to hear from you guys, so feel free to leave a comment or spark up a conversation. I love getting to know you guys. And now back to the show.
So what is Keynesian economics? Well, before we get into Keynesian economics, let's get into the person who invented Keynesian economics, which is Maynard Keynes. And Maynard Keynes is a very special person, because if you look him up on Wikipedia, it says that he reinvented how we perceive the economy, right? And I believe that was in the 50s, right? And he basically, what you need to know about Maynard Keynes is that he was a pedophile. And one of the things that he liked to do was he liked to go out to different countries and different brothels where he could rape children, right? And that's the person who invented this new economic theory that's based on consumption, right? And what you'll see today is, so how does it happen that the Federal Reserve keeps printing money, that the elite keeps spending money on luxuries? Luxuries get actually cheaper and of a lower quality, but basic needs like housing and food is getting more expensive, right? Well, all that stuff is because Maynard Keynes basically said that the state has to get involved to regulate the economy, right? And what that means is that, you know, those welfare checks that you received during COVID are a Keynesian concept. Right?
Stimulus checks, because they're supposed to stimulate the economy, as they say.
They stimulate, you know, rich people's dicks. That's what they stimulate. But
that's the truth, though, because I've been seeing that basically the concept that you were just kind of talking about. And it's one of those things that you don't see it until you really like pay attention and see it, that all these luxuries, all these random little items and things are all cheap. And then on the flip side, all the things that you have to pay for in order to live are all overly expensive. And like you were talking about, it's lining the rich people's pockets, because at the end of the day, all those little random luxury items that are being produced that you're spending all your money on, like, they're being created by those people. So it's just putting money back into their pockets, you know?
Think about it. The luxury market, you know, it's devaluing because, why is it devaluing? Because, you know, over time, the more money you print, the more value it loses. The more machines you use to create commodities, the more value they lose, right? Because machines are not capable of creating new value. They're only capable of transferring value. And so when you have these luxury goods, they actually lose value over time and they're becoming less luxurious. And what you have, what's based on what a luxury commodity now is based on perception, just name, just by title, right? And so these rich people, they don't need basic goods, right? They already have all the houses, they already have all the real estate, they're pretty much sorted out on that, right? And so they would like to have cheaper luxury goods because then they can consume better, right? But who's suffering is obviously you, me, people who aren't necessarily the top 1%. And that's how you get crisis. And here's the thing, like that's how you get a 2008 market crash. That's how you get a fucking Great Depression, right? So Maynard Keynes, pedophile, loved to spend his money on raping children, right? And so based on this character, that's how he created his theory. That's all based on consumption. And that's why it's called the consumer, and that's what the economy is based on.
Is that the origin of that terminology, just out of curiosity? Like customer?
Probably.
Is that where the origin of that came from?
Probably.
Or consumer?
Probably. I'd say so, yeah. Because the state doesn't see you as a human. The state sees you as a consumer. And in economic terms, that means that your entire existence is based on how much money you spent, right? Now, instead of spending big money, right, like on real estate and all that stuff, which could actually get you out of the economy or at least make you less of a consumer, right? It's important that you just are a constant consumer of small luxury goods, right? That's why our total amount that we spend on luxury goods compared to the 60s is which in the 60s it was about $4,000 a month, right? And now it's $2,000 a month. But basic needs in the 60s costed $2,000 a month, roughly, and now they cost $6,000 a month. So it has been inverted. There's been a switcheroo, right? And that just, you think like, oh, this is crazy. Like, how is this possible, right? But that's the natural progression of our current economic structure. That's how it's always was supposed to be. And it's only going to get worse, right?
It seems like at a certain point, it's almost like the bread and circus concept that, for their optimal economy to work, for the elites that are trying to run this stuff, the whole intention is that they want you to have your money gone as fast as you're spending it, so that you're always staying in this debt slave concept and you always will keep working, but you're never actually able to save up to actually get out of it anywhere. So on the other flip side of that, everybody's having trouble affording these smaller things. So affording the main things that they need. So on the other side, if they make like being able to go buy an Xbox a little bit cheaper, or being able to go and do whatever this random thing is a little bit cheaper, it's the bread and circus concept that, the economy's in shambles, everything is collapsing, but we're keeping the people entertained so that they're staying quiet. And even with that, I mean, an expansion of that could even be going into like the whole sports betting concept that, you're keeping people in this repetitive cycle so they're not actually paying attention to everything as much. So, I mean, it almost kind of seems like it was intended to eventually get to this point, because that's when you like optimize the person being a materialistic like debt slave.
The point is to keep consuming. Right?
Yeah, and as soon as it goes out, kind of it's just constantly recycling it out.
That's why when 9/11 happened, one of the things that George Bush said, and the governor of New York said, were keep buying, right? Use your credit cards, spend your cash, do all of that, right? Take out loans. Why? Because when consumption stops, capital cannot regurgitate itself, right? It'll collapse completely. So the only reason the system keeps itself alive is because we keep consuming. And the problem is we can't stop consuming, because if we stop to consume, we stop to exist. So we're stuck in this consumer market, and we have to keep consuming to stay alive. And they're making it worse now, right? They're always optimizing for reducing the living conditions and optimize even more for consumption. And that's how Keynesian economics robbed the youth of its opportunities, right? We were supposed to own houses. We were supposed to have a family at fucking 35 and retire at 40 or 50. And we didn't. We didn't, because we've been robbed of our future. We've been robbed of a great opportunity. Why? Because it was the top 1% who kept driving the market into crises to bail themselves out.
Even on the flip side, they keep a workforce longer too, because on the back end, it's like as soon as you're not working, you essentially just become a weight on the system as far as they're concerned. So, I mean, if they push people into these farther points of debt where they know that even like Social Security or retirement isn't able to cover it and these people keep working, I mean, that's part of the intention, is that you're only valuable to them as long as you're still able to make goods for them or do services for them.
I would argue that actually it's the opposite. They want you to become a burden. They want you to become a burden to society. So the more unemployment there is, the more money they can save on employment fees, and the more you're forced to take out loans, which puts you even further in debt, right? Until the bank one day decides your credit isn't good enough, and they just won't give you any loans anymore. But the rich can do it ad infinitum, because they have all the assets to justify taking these loans, right? So that's how we've been robbed of our youth, right? So you think to yourself, okay, like, why don't we just stop crisis? Why don't we just stop driving things to crisis? And what do they gain benefit from ruining the economy all the time? Well, for capital to make money, for rich people to make money, they have to drive the economy into shambles. That's how they make money. Because by driving the economy into shambles, they can bail themselves out. They can take out more loans, and you stay poor, right? It's not really about making money. It's just about controlling people, because they have all the money in the world. They don't need any more money, all right? They just want to control you. That's it, right? And so that's the natural course of our economic structure, is to drive constantly into collapse. And so you'd say, well, we've had spikes in the economy, like when, for example, in the 50s, there was a spike in the economy. Well, but that spike in economy was less than before. And every spike in the economy always was less than before. So there's this tendency fall of the rate of profit, right? Where we constantly fall below the line of a previous spike. And over time and long term, we just make less and less and less and less money, right? Think of 2016 when Trump was elected, how good the economy was, and think of it now, right? Is it doing good? Maybe, but less than before. And that's always the trajectory, right? If you look at Germany in the 50s, they were doing pretty good. And then in the 90s, before the euro came to be, they were doing good too, but less so.
That's where it seems like it progresses to, though, is that there's always this thing where it's never going to get as good as it was. It's like this constant bump up and down, but it never gets as high as the previous high point was. So like everybody's hoping that we'll get back to this like, 70s or like 90s type economy. But I think that we're just going to keep hitting these peaks that are lower than it was before.
Exactly. So the economy is never going to be good as it was in the 50s or before that, right?
It's only better by comparison.
compared to like the lows that we have. But the lows, they're there by design, right? And that's how the top 1% makes their money. So think of the 2008 market crash, right? Why did it happen? Because they confidently said, no, the market is fine. The market is fine. We can keep sending out loans to people. They were confident. They were so confident in doing this. And then 2008 happened. Actually, the market crashed in 2005, but they didn't say that it crashed. They just kept printing money until 2008 happened, and then it really crashed. But by the time it didn't matter, the top 1% bailed themselves out with, I believe it was 80% of the assets or 81%. The top 20%, they took their 10%. And the rest of the people, they got fucked. Right? So that's how they steal your money. So you think to yourself, well, how is it then? How is this? How does this create goofy schmoofies? Well, we're just a product of our economy. And so what happens is people who are fully enveloped in that economy, in that economic structure, they start getting the same behaviors where they're constantly used to failing. They're constantly used to a decline, right? Because that's what's happening in their outside world. So the goofy schmoofy constantly collapsing into failure shows that the economy also collapses constantly into failure. It's actually because he fails constantly. It's because the economy fails constantly. That's how it's done. And you think to yourself, well, is there a way out? Not as long as you're buying, not as long as you're consuming. You're always going to be stuck in this system.
See, right? At that point, the only thing, I mean, you can't even really live off grid or even try to completely evade the material world.
Water.
Yeah, because otherwise you have to have some type of hookup to either power, water, or something. Otherwise, they'll come and they'll completely shut down you being able to live on that property. Like a couple of guys I know that live off grid, they'll, have these like full setups. They have solar power, everything, but they have to have like one hookup still to something to live there legally. So they'll have like power running to one pole to run a light, and then everything else is run off of solar. But I mean, even with that, you're still consuming. Like they've made it so that it's almost illegal to not be part of the system.
Right. I mean, during the first industrial revolution, what happened was there were all these farmers, and they hired brown jackets and black jackets to force farmers out of their farm into the city forcefully. Right? They burnt their crops. They threatened with guns, with weapons, all that stuff, to basically force these farmers into the city. Because when you learn about it in school, you think to yourself, oh, why would farmers give up their good farm life to go to the city? It makes no sense. Well, they didn't do it willfully. They were forced to do it by the state. And so the state, the top 1%, they will always find a way to keep you in that loop, to keep you in that economy, because that's how they make their money. And when you try to go off grid, when you try to take yourself out of it, they won't let you. And they'll do it through economic force, political force, physical force, whatever is necessary.
And I mean, this seems to be like where the whole like smart city future is seeming to kind of come into play is, if you let people escape outside of the city, so to speak, then, they're not contributing to being part of this constant rotating system. But if you're keeping people within this like barrier where, if they, any item that they could possibly want, they can't go get it themselves. They have to go and buy it from this place. They have to do it from this place. They have to go to this place. Then again, you go back into that cycle that it's just this constant flow where it's almost like the money turns to water at a certain point, that the second you get it, it's already gone. And that's already kind of where this system is currently. And I mean, that's just obviously with just bills and stuff like that. But I mean, it's a continuation of the system where it's kind of a weird thing to think about, but once you get to this point where they talk about like, what's the word that they use for it? Where it's like the income that's given by the state. There's a specific word for it that I'm thinking of.
We're not talking about stimulus checks, though, no?
No, not stimulus checks. It's like the basically where they would just give you an income to almost like exist at that point. And then at that point, it's almost like the stimulus check concept that you're basically just giving it so that people can spend it at that point, and it just keeps people again in this rotating, repetitive cycle.
Right. But the problem with those stimulus checks is that they're not taking them out of these Federal Reserves, where most of the money is. They're taking it out of social reserves, so out of your own tax money, right? So now they forcefully indebt you to that system through the stimulus checks. And then later, they cycle back into making you pay for it again by increasing taxes. Right? So you have a Democratic Party that says, oh yeah, fight against inflation. You need stimulus checks. You guys need help. Right? And then you do that for however long a presidential term is, right? Then there comes the Republican Party and says, well, all this debt that we have, we need to fix it. We need to fix our economy. And they ramp up production even further. People work longer hours. People pay more taxes. People pay more bills. And because now you've crashed the economy again through these stimulus checks. That's always the cycle, and that's why inflation is not a real thing. It's also it's a crisis that's also designed to happen to keep you more into that system.
One of the ironic things that I find about this like whole economic thing that a lot of people don't seem to understand is this whole concept, kind of like what you were mentioning, that the more aid that you get from the state, the more that it ends up getting kind of taken from everybody. So it's like, everybody wants to be involved in these programs where you're getting, as you think it is, free money, but it's not free money. It's money that's split between like everybody. And this is where like the whole college thing was coming into play a couple of years ago, that everybody was so mad about it. And the people that didn't go to that went to college were like, oh, I don't understand why people are so mad. It's going to make everything easier for all of us. It's like, no, you're now making it so that the people that couldn't afford to go to college at the time now have to pay for somebody else to have gone to college. And it goes into this whole idea of like socialist economics, where it's just only like a step away from like communist economics. And it's like, it's so blatantly in front of everybody, but they just change the verbiage for it. And then people go, oh, no, it's a good thing. What are you talking about? Like, the more money that they take from all of us, the better off all of us can be. Like, we need daddy government to tell us how to spend our money properly.
Right. But the thing is with that, even with that notion about a communist market, I mean, what I would say is that what you just described, it's actually very capitalistic. It is to say that, let the government decide how to spend your money, because in a capitalist system, you do not have private property. All property that you own, even your money, it's a loan. It's loaned to you by the government. If you look at China, for example, they have a pretty good system for being communist, right? They punish their billionaires if they start acting against the interests of the people by, state punishment, which basically just means very traditional Chinese executions.
And then your organs get donated.
Sure. They get donated, right? But that is good. That system is good, right? Because you have to use certain, if they're willing to use violence against you, right, then there is no like debating there. A debate can't happen because they're not listening to you, right? They only think about, well, I'm running my scheme. I'm running my capitalist scheme. And all I can think about is running that scheme. And I'm smarter than these people, and I'm better than these people, and they can't do anything, which under any normal circumstances, yes. Until people start, I'm not advocating for anything. I'm just saying, like, historically speaking, right, that's usually what happens. Like, it's what happened in China. It's what happened in the Soviet Union, right? And they're doing pretty good for being a communist system. So it's not really so much so that it's a communist concept to say that, well, your money goes to the government, right? It is actually a very capitalist system, right? Because your worth is not measured by your labor output, but your worth is measured by a a societal concept that is where the value is based on perception, right? And so about the college thing, right? To say that, well, you have to pay for this person to go to college. So people, let's 80% of people pay for the 20% of people to go to college. That's just mirroring what's happening with the elite right now.
Hold that thought. We'll be back in a flash. But if you don't like hearing the ads, then I have a solution for you. You can get ad-free and early access to this show and Bizarre Encounters with Shayn Orin on the Open Minds Media Patreon for just $1 a month. That's less than the price of a bag of chips, and it's a great way to support the show and all the hard work behind it. And if you're interested in merch store discounts or premium video versions of the show, then there are a few other tiers with additional benefits and 7-day free trials available. Now let's get back into it. But they're still going to try to flip that and make it sound like a positive thing, because now they're going to try to flip that concept and say, you know, you're paying for the 20%, but those 20% might be the doctor that saves you one day. Or they're going to start trying to flip the concept on you and make it seem like it's a justified means.
The same way your manager says, or the business owner says that he's taking all the risk for running the business, is how they convince. It's a mirror of that. But what kind of risk does this business person really take, other than taking out a loan? The only risk they take is that they can't take out any loans anymore, which is impossible because they constantly take out loans and they have all the assets to justify to take those loans. But the only risk but let's say one day they couldn't. The only risk they take is becoming an employee themselves, right? And all that money that they make, you know, like Jeff Bezos didn't make his money because he's so innovative. But Jeff Bezos made his money because he exploited so many workers out of their money, using that system, that state, that government that allows him to do that in the first place. But if you tell it to Jeff Bezos, he's just going to give you a fluoride stare. You know, same thing if you tell it's the same fluoride stare your uncle gives you, your aunt gives you on Thanksgiving when you start talking about how 9/11 was an inside job. It's the same stare, right? And that stare is symptomatic of that, because any questioning of that system, any questioning on, or any like truth that you reveal to people doesn't make sense, because they're so involved into that system. And they like that system too, because they think that they can take a part of what has been stolen from them using that same system.
It's that Yuri Bezmenov psychological brainwash concept that, you know, if you psychologically brainwash somebody long enough, then you can present them with the truth and they're still going to look right past it. You know, they're not going to want to believe the truth. And even on like the flip side of that, I know I've mentioned this on a few shows. I maybe even have mentioned it last time that I was talking to you on the show, but you know, if somebody lives in the system their entire life and they think that they're working at something in the system, and then one day they realize that the system doesn't work with the rules that they thought that it's played by, you know, that breaks a lot of people mentally. So rather than trying to cope with realizing that, you know, they're fighting against this unwinnable game, you know, they would rather just kind of sit back down and, you know, let the blinders stay on so that they can just pretend like everything's okay and everything's been the same as it all was. Like the truth, people want to look away from it because once they realize it, like it shatters their paradigm of the reality they're living in.
100%. 100%. And then again, it will also take away the chance that they believe that, it will also take away the belief that they have a chance at winning at this system and also becoming part of the top 1%. Right.
See, I don't think people realize that. I mean, there's definitely some stories of people that will just make it out of nowhere, but there's always question behind those. But
they're selected.
Yeah, I was going to say, it seems like, you know, they always try to do this like rag to riches story, but when you really start looking into it, all these people that are popping up and they're like the new, you know, entrepreneurs and all this, like they're already linked to family money. So they already had that golden plate to start off with. So it's like they're not really starting rags to riches, but they make it seem like they are so that everybody else will keep saying, he did it, I can do it too. And then it keeps everybody entranced into the system thinking that they can get to that same spot when they don't realize that they didn't start off with the same benefits to start.
Right. It's a fetishism. It's a fetishism where they think that, hey, if this guy can make it, I can make it too. I just have to work hard and consume more. Right. They don't understand that the harder you work in our current system, the harder you work, it's just going to incite you to consume more. And a lot of these people who say they made rags to riches, like you said, they're either funded by their family or they're state funded. So they're federal agents who purposefully send out that message to keep people further interpolated into that ideology. And if you look at places like Reddit or Substack or YouTube, even Spotify, there's so many feds involved in there to make people believe that, hey, whatever system we're currently in, it's good. Even if they take an anti-state position, they still take a pro-elite position.
And as soon as people get figured out, they go, oh, there's a bunch of Russian bots, or there's a bunch of Russians that are in on Reddit or on this thing. They'll just cover it up and pretend like it's somebody else.
Historically, that's always what happened. What happened. There's the economic recession. The people are upset. Blame the Russians. Right? That's how they always did it. So I kind of understand why, again, not taking any positions here, but I kind of understand why Russia is reacting the way they do. Because by default, Russia was always the scapegoat for any bad thing that happened in Western Europe and in the US.
In a weird way, I mean, I don't know if you dive into a lot of the alternative history stuff, but it always seems like there's been this massive aggression where Russia has always continuously been the bad guy for everybody. And when you start diving into it, it almost kind of seems like there's obviously layers to a lot of this stuff, but it seems like they seem to be privy to a lot of information, or they've retained a lot of information. And it seems like the fear always is is Russia releasing information. So it's I don't know. I'm curious about what they could potentially be sitting on that makes them always the bad guy and always the scapegoat through the years. Because, I mean, even if you start getting into a little bit more of a touchy subject, but the whole hierarchy with the Jewish mafia, so to speak, it all kind of links back where there was the big war in Russia with the Jews, and then it kind of all spread out from there. And then continuously from that point on, Russia's always been the bad guy to the rest of the world. And yeah, I think it's a matter of releasing information more than anything, but
I mean, okay.
I was trying to dance around this subject without getting too far into it, because I didn't want to open up a whole other can of worms with this concept. But once you start diving into the controlling elites and realize who they really are, it gets a lot deeper, And then you start noticing all these little wars and all these little scrimmages, and you're like, all right, maybe things aren't exactly as we perceive them. And yeah, that's when it gets real weird, is when you start really looking into the pre-World War II stuff with the Weimar Republic and the whole thing with the economy then. And to bring it back full circle, since we're getting into another random topic, but yeah, to bring it back to the economic part of it. But
right. I mean, okay, fine, we can do this. How do I explain this? The Russian thing was always a thing, and the kings of Europe, ancient kings of Europe, did it, and then after the first industrial revolution, England did it. They've always wanted to take over Russia because Russia has a lot of land, a lot of resources, especially oil.
Weirdly enough, some of the smartest philosophers come out of Russia too, but they always get repressed. But
well, for a good reason. They're the smartest for a good reason, right? I mean,
there was a book called We that came before 1984. It came before Brave New World. It actually inspired all those, but nobody ever hears about that because it was from a Russian author in the early 1900s.
Right, because and they can't have a Russian author be big in the West because then you have the problem of people starting to take a pro-Russia position, which over time a pro-Russia position has now become an anti-West position for a good reason. Because they keep constantly fucking with them. We as Westerners, keep constantly thinking that they're the bad guys, even though if you really talk to a Russian person, they're not that many differences between you as a conservative and a Russian conservative, right? But that being said, like, Russians have always been a scapegoat ever since the medieval ages. Why? Because they've been trying to take over that land for centuries, because it's rich in resources. That's actually how the Soviet Revolution happened. It was funded by Germans and the English crown. But what they didn't expect is that the Soviets were actually, the Bolsheviks were the real thing, and they really hated them, and they started shooting the monarchy. Great, but they also started shooting the Romanovs, who were supposed to take over the government and hand it over to the English crown, right? And so that whole shenanigan happened. And ever since that, Russia has become more hostile towards the West for good reason, right? Now, the Jew thing with Russia, what I would say is, and that's going to be controversial, but without the Jews, right, without the Bolsheviks, Russia would have never industrialized. So they pushed that industrialization process forward. Was it violent? Was it, bad? Yeah, the first year was bad. But, pipes needed to be built, tractors needed to be built, and industrialization had to happen. It doesn't happen without sacrifice. So, the Jews definitely did, or the Bolsheviks in this case, definitely did push that industrialization process forward, right? Which the Soviet Union later on, when Stalin took over, was riding off of. And all these processes that were there in the Soviet Union, the government, were created by people like Lenin and Trotsky, who are Jews, right? The thing about the Jews in Russia is we have this misconception that we confuse them for Jews in the West, right? The Jews in Russia thought of themselves as Russian Jews, which is to say that, yes, they were Jewish, but culturally they identified as Russian, and they were proud of their motherland and loyal to their motherland, right? And so there is this weird. So Russia is not very ethnocentric. It's very multi-ethnic, because you have so many different races involved, that the Russian identity does not belong to a race, as many Westerners confuse that, but it belongs to sort of like an empire, like the Roman Empire, where people from Syria were identifying as Romans. Same thing happens with Russia. So Jews, they thought of themselves as Russian Jews, and they were loyal to their motherland, and they were proud of their motherland, and they generally tried to make it better, right? Later on, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, which was perpetuated by Gorbachev and the CIA, they obviously tried to get all these Russian Jews into Israel, right, to sort of like justify a state. But again, these Russian Jews who are in Israel, they don't consider themselves as Jews. They still consider themselves as Russian.
Don't go anywhere, guys. We'll be right back with that deep conversation you crave. But just a quick reminder, if you'd like to snag some gear for this show, Bizarre Encounters, or one of your favorite cryptids or topics, hop on over to the Open Minds Media merch store for a wide range of designs with new drops regularly. And t-shirts now for the low price of just $15.68 plus shipping. And now let's get back into it.
So a lot of times, so that's in the Russian Jewish history there, right? So with that lens, that's how we have to sort of like look at it. But Jews, with all their problems, one of the things that they're good at is they're very smart. and they're very good at running processes. One of the things that Westerners like to do is put these Jews into these administrative places to use them to run processes, and later, and obviously do usury and all that stuff, right? Like the Spanish kings did, actually, who because their Christian laws didn't allow them to do usury, so they had to use Jews to do usury. Then later would blame the Jews for collapsing the economy because they couldn't pay off their debt and kick them out, right? So, and again, another Western concept that is always there is that we put Jews in these administrative places. And I'm not saying that there aren't people in power who are Jewish and who are obviously like the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, right? They obviously exist and they're evil, but it's not because they're evil. They're not evil because they're Jewish. They're evil because they're part of that elitist group and they have their own self-interest in mind, right? But one of the things that we as Westerners like to do, and that's the problem that we as Westerners have, is we put those Jews into these administrative places, and then blame them for our economic recession and kick them out. But the problem is that after we kick them out, who is running these processes now that were so efficient in the first place? Well, no one. And then you have another collapse, right? They say that the Spanish Empire, after they kicked out the Jews, they were doing good. Yeah, because they were running off of that system that was created by the Jews in the first place. And then they started doing worse after this, right? So that's the pattern that we always have. So I'm not saying that Jews don't have any faults and they're innocent people. No, they have their faults too. They're just like every other race, just like every other group, right? They have their faults, and yes, they love to scheme, and yes, they love to play money games, right? But that's also what makes them so good at running economies, and that's why elitists love to use them for these things, right? So that, I guess on the Jewish question, the best way to fight a Jew is to have your own Jew who helps to fight other Jews.
Fight fire with fire.
Exactly. You're being instead of trying to take an anti-Semitic position, just get another Jew to fight for you.
Weird side note while I'm thinking about it, just because it just popped into my head again that, you've lived in Germany the majority of your life.
Yeah.
So I've heard about this whole concept of the Weimar Republic. I've done my own research into it and everything, but coming from your perspective, from somebody that's actually lived in Germany, you've maybe even talked to people who are around at this time at some point. What's like the inside of Germany's perspective of like the Weimar Republic? Because of course, with a lot of the conspiracy stuff going on now and a lot of the diving into the World War II concepts, and I know it's a really, really touchy subject because once you start diving into at least the conspiracy side of the Weimar Republic, as far as like basically they were running all these operations with like prostitution and everything, and they basically just want to push them out of the country. Again, kind of dancing around the subject and I get too far into it. But again, like what's your perspective from like a German? Like what's the Weimar Republic to you?
Well, based on what I learned, or based on what's been taught in school, obviously it was thought of as it had its good sides and its bad sides, right? What they like to say that during the Weimar Republic, all this creative output was created and how the German culture was further developed, right? But then obviously there was an economic recession and people were doing really bad, right? But again, it wasn't because Jews were in power. It's because some Jews who were in power, the same with Germans who were in power, abused that economic system to their benefit.
Weird side question too. So it seems like, at least for Americans, like the 60s is when like sexual exploration kind of started. And I know that with like some weird new documentaries kind of diving into the Weimar Republic, they're almost trying to spin it away from like the depraved concepts of it and make it seem like it might be some form of like, when sexuality really kind of like took off behind the scenes, like we were kind of talking about before with all the weird, really kinky German stuff, but at least coming from, again, the perspective inside of the country, like, did you guys kind of see it as like the start of, I guess, like your sexual exploration, or did you guys acknowledge the like depravity of it, where again you'd have like mothers and daughters working together as like a group of prostitutes servicing the same person?
It wasn't really talked about it's not really talked about, right? But what I would say is that it did shape the culture a lot.
Because that was the origin of smut films too, correct? Was Weimar Republic?
Yeah. And I mean, over time, prostitution is still a big thing in Germany. And a lot of people actually have good opinions about this, saying that, well, making prostitution legal, it's actually what saves these prostitutes from there's certain laws that protect them then, right? Which, I mean, I guess.
You push the taboo farther, though, on the other side, too, that if you legalize this concept, then people in the underground are going to need something more. And then, again, that's when you end up with things like smut films and like the really vulgar stuff. Right.
So, Germans, they're with all their sexual liberation, and they still hold on to it to this day. It's still very normal to do kinky stuff over there. I mean, that's why you look at German porn. It's very...
But there's kinky without hurting people, and then there's stuff that just should never even be thought of,
Listen. It's one of the things that was also rising during the Weimar Republic was Satanism and Sabbateanism, right? Which is to say that people purposefully do sinful things to reach the divine. So normalizing sexual depravity was one of the things. Right?
I mean, transgenderism also kind of had a start 100%. During that time too, especially with some of like the burlesque shows and like the drag.
100%.
And they actually were, I think, doing surgeries at that point to some people, right?
They were doing surgeries too, yeah. But again, like all of this happened because, and I'm going to make a spiritual argument here, is because there is two ways you can ascend into divinity, right? You can either ascend up yourself by keeping yourself clean and pure, which, I mean, good luck today. Or you bring divinity down to you by doing all sorts of depravity to force it to come onto earth, right? Sort of like if you want to get a reaction out of your parents, you just do a bunch of pranks, right? And you break their statues and their home decoration to get their attention. Something like that.
It almost kind of seems like it's bad. Like, to me at least, it seems like if you want to be pure and you want to elevate to like this higher consciousness, you're going to be dealing with like good entities. So like the flip side doesn't make sense, because it's almost like, all right, we can't achieve that, so we're going to bring the stuff that's a lower vibration to our level. So it's like, all right, we can't achieve divinity, so now let's just bring the worst of the worst to our level.
Right. Well, you're doing the worst of the worst to bring divinity down to you, right? And because it's a mirror dimension, it's as above, so below, right? So what you have to understand is not that it's the opposite direction, but it's actually one and the same thing. Doing a bunch of depravity, you just don't have access to the pure form, but to the shell of it, right? Which is what the Klipothic realm is. It's the shell of the Kabbalistic tree, right? It's a shell of divinity, right? So by doing a bunch of depravity, it is a way up too, just faster and more messed up, and you're paying a bigger price. But demons and angels, they're the same entity. It just depends on how clean you are, and whether or not they approve of you. but they're still doing the same thing. Like angels are siphoning your energy just as much as demons are. Just that these angels, they have higher standards, right? They want to have cleaner food. And these demons, they're like Brazilian crack whores. They don't give a fuck. They'll eat anything.
Throw them a bone.
Exactly. they'll just swallow that shit right up, dude. You know?
Man, it just, again, to me, like, the logic of it, I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me that it almost just kind of seems like you know that you can't get to this point of purity, so you just completely taintish everything at that point. And it's not getting you necessarily to that point, but it's just kind of destroying everything for everybody else. Like, I know that like, I understand the method on how they see it, but I don't actually see that coming into fruition like as they would expect that it would be. It would just be, again, rather than like some people elevating, you just kind of try to bring everybody down to the same level is almost kind of what it seems like.
Right, because that's easier. And, you know, a lot of times it's not even in your control. Let me tell you a little story, right? There is, you know, Cain and Abel from the Bible, right?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. And so Cain, who was the first sinner who killed his brother Abel, he had a son called Lamech. And Lamech actually was always praying to God and always trying to get God's reaction, his approval and all that stuff. But God would not listen to him because Lamech had a cursed soul because he was paying for the price that his father accumulated, right? So because he was Cain's son, he had a cursed soul. It was brought down to him. And so God would not even speak to him. At some point, he started worshiping the Leviathan, who would actually answer to him and give him that raw power that's like dark and all that stuff. And he did a bunch of depravity too. So his son, forgot his name, was actually getting jealous because he would pay, his father, Lamech, would only pay attention to the Leviathan and not to him. So he tried to destroy that beast. Again, God would not listen to him. But then he started worshiping technology, and he developed technology to kill the Leviathan, which obviously can't happen because the Leviathan is so powerful that only God can kill him. That his son died and all that stuff. The main point of the story is that you can try and keep as pure as possible, but if your soul is cursed, what do you do, right? So for a lot of people, they go the dark path, not because they necessarily want to. I mean, don't get me wrong, most of them do want to. Most of them are ontologically evil. But sometimes it's easier because that's what you're destined to do, you know? And so dealing with that reality is hard for a lot of people, and they don't know, you know, that's why this is actually a Bible secret that's not being talked about. And if you would ask a priest, or if you would ask any religious authority about this, they would shush you real quick. But yeah, you kind of then have to deal with this reality. Okay, like if my soul is cursed from birth, then what do I do? What path do I take? And is there redemption for me? You know?
I mean, if you're viewing it from that context, I mean, it seems like the elites are the ones that get heavily into this occult concept of, again, trying to bring this to our world and our reality. So, I mean, that means like those families have been involved in these occult philosophical concepts of worshiping Saturn or whatever for so long that, you know, if this cursed offspring concept has any full ground to it, like at that point they already know. It's like they're already in for an inch, in for a mile. Like they might as well side with the side that's at least going to speak with them, I guess. Like not trying to justify their actions by any means, but you know, if you're stuck behind a rock in a hard place, I guess, you know, that's what you're going to do, you know?
Right.
You don't see it as there being any other option at that point. And especially if it's something that your family's been doing for generations and generations, like the same repetitive cycle, like you can't escape from a cycle that you're born into. Like it's extremely hard to do, especially if, for example, you're the controlling elite. Like how are you going to escape that family? You're like, there is no escaping that.
the same way you can have a good-hearted capitalist because the competition is too strong that at some point he has to exploit you,
Yeah, we look into morals, but as soon as it comes to business, then we, glorify the complete opposite of having good morals.
Right, right. And so the same way he can't be like, if you ever watched, what was the show? I forgot the name. There's a pretty popular meme about it. Zoolander. You ever watched Zoolander?
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. So towards the end of Zoolander, they're like saying, "Whoa, we gotta help the people, bro. Like they don't have it as good as we do. We gotta support them." What does it even mean? Support. Never heard of that word. So that in reality doesn't happen. Because even if you have a good boss, you have a good business owner, at some point he's forced to just cut costs because either he cuts costs or he loses his business. Right? And the same way goes here as well, where it's like, well, I can't be a good person because my soul is cursed to be a bad person, even if I want to be a good person. That's just how it is, right? That's the role that they've been given. I mean, don't get me wrong. A lot of them do enjoy it, and that's for sure not a justification for them at all. But if you were to explain it, why they would want to push for so much degeneracy instead of purity, well, that's why. Plus, it's also easier to push for degeneracy than for purity. That's the other thing too.
I mean, even looking at it from a money standpoint too, like if you introduce people to these concepts, then it's just a whole other market that you can make money off of. So, I mean, even on the back end of it, there's two things you can get from it. One, you can get money, and on the other side, you can get true power because, true power doesn't come from money. It comes from what strings you can pull and what favors you can get and what blackmail you can get. So, again, if you normalize this stuff and create a market out of it, then not only are you making money off of it, but you also create this opportunity to be able to take true power from it too.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, it's very addicting. Once you get the taste of it, I don't know if you ever slaughtered a cow. I have. Long story. But that feeling of it's exhilarating, right? So why would people do human sacrifices? Why would people worship on altars? Why would people push for so much degeneracy? Why would they worship demons and Satan? Because that feeling is exhilarating. It's addicting. People love it. The same way that people love money. The same way people love power. It's addicting. It's exhilarating. And if you're already cursed to be that, then you might as well enjoy it, right?
Hold that thought. Inquiries of Our Reality will be right back after this brief commercial break. And now let's dive back in. I mean, even on the flip side of that, I don't think, at least from my perspective, I don't think anybody, the whole cursed concept, if God loves his children, I don't feel like he would just instantly damn them right off the bat. And I'm sure that the whole idea of your son has to pay for your sins probably is primarily based in Old Testament. And there's this weird back and forth with Old Testament and New Testament God. But my assumption, at least for this current time, is that God would not necessarily just damn his children right off the bat. So that whole concept of that almost kind of seems like there could also be this psychological brainwashing to it, because when you start diving into a lot of this occult family and why they would worship Satan and Saturnism and all this kind of stuff, the whole thing with it is that they kind of view it as everybody should have been privy to all this knowledge, but, God wanted to keep this knowledge from us. So how dare he damn the fallen angels who only wanted to help us. So it's all this thing where you just take this idea and you bend it to fit your scheme to make it look like everything is completely reversed of what it is. And in turn, it's this whole idea of continuous psychological brainwashing. And not to get into a whole other deep can of worms, but it seems like the more that I've dived into all of this occult philosophy and everything, it's just this master understanding of psychology mixed with philosophy, that you manipulate people with psychology, but you get them to stay and get involved with the philosophy portion of it. So if you're able to combine both of these things and make it seem like it's this whole magic secret, then you can essentially control people forever and just keep them in this repetitive cycle of like, you know, you're going to get all these secrets, you're going to get all this, you're going to get all of this. So they think that they're like heavily involved in the occult. But on the other side, it's like, I wonder if the people that are running these occult groups don't actually believe in anything that they're doing, almost like how a cult group would work. How a cult group would work, that they don't necessarily believe their own bullshit, but they know that if they use this combination of philosophy and psychology, that they can completely control people forever.
I mean, a lot of things on the occult is Nephilim propaganda, which is to say that the fallen angels, the Nephilim, have created those promises, those fake promises, and those fake powers to get people to accept their deals and siphon their energy so they could repeat that ritual of the tree of life again and become like God, right? That's definitely out there. So a lot of the stuff on the occult that you see, I wouldn't necessarily believe it right away because a lot of it is Nephilim propaganda, right? And to your other point that you've made, I mean, in order for you to run a system, you gotta believe in something, and that's why these top elite, they believe in Satanism because it's more compatible with what they're doing, right? It's not so much that they're filthy capitalists because they're Satanists. No, it's because they've always been filthy capitalists, and they need a belief system to sort of like ground them into something, and that was the best. Freemasonry and all that stuff was the best thing. That was the most compatible for them, right?
I mean, even within that, though, like prime example, like a cult leader, there's definitely, it's up for debate whether or not they actually believe what they're spouting. But at the end of the day, you know, whether you believe it or not, if you go around and say that, you know, you're Jesus, you know, the rest of your group's going to believe it. And, you know, you may seem like you're the one that's like the messenger to God, that's like bringing all this information, or the messenger to Satan bringing all this information. But at the end of the day, it's like, again, you know that you're just using psychology and you're manipulating these people, and you don't actually believe it. You just need that mindset so that everybody else believes it, so that they continue pushing on. And once you get philosophy involved, then that's when it gets really, really hard, because then it transcends ages, where you get people so deep into this brainwashing that they fully believe it. And, you know, 1,000 years after the person that started it isn't around anymore, if the psychology and the philosophy is so deep that people still full-blown believe in it, then it's going to stick around forever.
Yeah, I mean, there's things like Mormonism, right, where you have Joseph Smith, who convinced a bunch of people that he was getting messages from gods, you know, and then created a whole cult, which later on became a religion.
But does he believe in it? Like, is it psychology and philosophy, or, you know, is it that this guy honestly is just that crazy that he believes this stuff and everybody else is just following him? But if you're that crazy that you believe in that, like, there's this charismatic aspect to it too, which again goes back into that, like, this guy knows psychology, whether he believes it or not, you know, like, there's this charismatic aspect to it. Like,
sure. But again, like, does he need to believe in it in order for it to be successful? That's like,
no, he doesn't.
Question.
He just has to know how to manipulate everybody else to believe it.
Right. So whether he believes in it or not doesn't matter. Does matter is that he's able to run his scheme. And again, like, that exists. That's out there. You know, there's Charles Manson, there's Joseph Smith. All of them led successful cults, whether they actually believed in their own stuff or not. But there's real stuff out there too, right? There is Gnosticism. There is Freemasonry. There is Sabbatean Kabbalism, you know, Satanism, all that stuff. That's very, very real. That's there. And if you read those ancient manuscripts, right, those very ancient manuscripts, like, they have a certain power to them, right, whether you believe or not. And that's why, for example, the Jews, when they say when they say they don't believe, they know that it's true. It's for a reason. It's very powerful, especially if you ever participated in one of their. I did once. I went to a synagogue once, and I did participate in their Sabbath celebration. It's very feels very real. It is very real. So again, like there's definitely cult leaders who know how to manipulate people, right? That exists. I'm not denying that. And we also can't deny that there is also very real evil forces who basically hate humanity for being human. And they want to exploit us to get their own goal, to push their own goals forward, right? So that's also real. Both aspects are real. And for sure, there were evil entities who used those cult leaders to sort of like get their goals moving forward, right? Why else would people participate in mass suicides if there wasn't a spiritual force that sort of like put gas behind it,
I mean, even with that too, it seems like it still could possibly come back to like the psychology aspect of things, where it's just a matter of like power, that it's like, this guy's already at his wit's end and he knows he's about to die anyway. So it's like, the ultimate power thing. Can I get all of these people to drink the Kool-Aid with me? I might as well just try it just for the sake of it. Like, I don't know, man. I have this back and forth where it's like, I definitely believe in both aspects of things, but I like to address it from both sides. And again, with all this occult stuff, I just always go back to this just being a master understanding of psychology and philosophy. And when you start diving into, again, to bring it full circle, like the pillars of wisdom, for example, like you start diving into all these ancient secrets. And now with more of a ground of understanding of all of it, we realize that it's all, again, just a mixture of philosophy and psychology, and just knowing how to utilize it properly to the point where some people perceive it as magic, like.
Right. And vice versa too. I mean, if you look at Freud, right, his psychoanalytic theories does come from mesmerization, especially gypsy mesmerization, right, and gypsy occultism. So a lot of the stuff that it's a lot of it is also it's a two-way street, right? So yes, there's a lot of occultism that is based on psychology, but a lot of psychology is also based on occultism, right? And if you look at the graphs, for example,
they're both the same thing, man. Just using two different words for it, man. It's just we're slowly starting to realize that it all blends together.
It blends together because they both took from each other, right?
And it's like a lot of the old, folklore stories, like we have better words to describe these concepts nowadays, but back in the day, they didn't have the same wordage to describe things. So now it's like you're looking at this thing like it's this really, really woo-woo concept, but, they may just be describing, again, how to manipulate the mind just in their best wording that they could use at the time.
Sure.
But it comes out all woo-woo and mystic because it's just a weird way of reading it, because they didn't have as direct and literal descriptions of all of these psychological terms like we do nowadays.
Right. I mean, yeah, totally agree with that. And again, it's also a lot of these psychology. I mean, if you look at these graphs, they're very occultish graphs. I mean, if you look at the graph of desire from Lacan, it is a Kabbalistic tree, right? So, a lot of things they just come from these ancient practices, right? But that doesn't delegitimize the actual spirituality behind it. It doesn't delegitimize the fact that there are spiritual forces that do have a certain pull towards us, right? And if you really want to know, you can go look up Sefer HaRazim, and there's just detailed instructions on how to do some of these rituals. And they don't say that, oh, this means this and this means that. No, it's just very like, well, this is what you have to do to achieve that and that and that and that, right? So I guess what I'll say is we cannot take the spiritual aspect of things out, because they are, at the end of the day, a driving force behind a lot of the structures that we have built nowadays, right? Whether whether true or not, I guess the kind of stance that I would take is, it's like listening to your demented grandfather. He's old, he's demented, but he still has good stuff to say. And there's still useful stuff in there. And so maybe you should just listen to it a little bit,
Just sort through it and pick out the gems.
Sure.
Same with doing research, in all fairness.
Right.
There's going to be some crazy, ridiculous claims out there, but there is going to be some very direct, to the point claims too.
Right. That's why I'm saying, like, a lot of the cool stuff, it is Nephilim propaganda, and they're really just there to rot your soul, and you really should listen to them. I mean, they do have some gems too, but they're not, like, 80% of the stuff is really just to doom your soul. So watch out for that one. Talking about New Age people. But again, like you said earlier, there's gems in there, and a lot of these gems, they do point towards something really big that we can't fully comprehend yet. But yeah, like that.
Well, I mean, it seems like my argument for the whole like knowledge thing, and the knowledge that God was trying to keep away from us, that the fallen angels gave us. Like, I don't think that there's necessarily any knowledge that we're not specifically supposed to have. It's just a matter of when we're supposed to have it. And I think that kind of falls in with this stuff. It's that, we've combined all of these pieces with all of these ancient philosophies and like practices and psychology and all that kind of stuff. And it's just a matter of like, we've collected all of it and it doesn't make sense right now. But one day when we've collected enough of it, we'll be able to stand back and look at it and say, all right, this makes sense. And it's not that, we were dumb at the time or anything like that. It's just a matter of like, with more understanding, like the broader picture is better understood. So it's just a matter of like when we're supposed to be able to stand back and view all of this information. But till then, we just are basically scrimmaging to try to collect everything until maybe even our brains become more complex and they're able to comprehend this broader concept. Like maybe that's what it is at this point, is that like the human mind just isn't developed enough to fully be able to grasp this, almost like otherworldly concept,
I guess the way you can think about it is this. I mean, I wouldn't say that God never intended for us to have this knowledge, because when he did say to Adam and Eve, when you eat from this fruit, which means that he knew that they were going to eat from this fruit and plant this, actually. It's sort of like, when do you really value something precious? It's only when you know what it's like to not have it in the first place, right? So it's like having your child watching porn for the first time. How you get him to stop watching porn? You could scream at him and tell him to not do it, or you could take him to like a porn shop where they sell porn physically and tell him, well, look at all these people who watch porn, or take him to Comic-Con and show him how people who are addicted to porn, what they look like. And then he sort of like sees that, he then has that knowledge that fucks him up, and then he stops, right? But it's not necessarily because you told him to stop. You just actually gave him more knowledge that's fucked up and degenerate and all that stuff. But only then could he really understand what he was doing, right? And appreciate the good stuff more,
I mean, that's honestly something that I've mentioned around that concept a lot of times on the show, that, if you really want to be able to understand something, like you have to be able to see both sides of it, meaning that like if you, just to bring, because we've been talking about psychology, you want to really understand psychology, you can't just look into light psychology, you also have to understand dark psychology. And that can be perceived two ways. Either one, you can use it to act on people, or on the other side, you can use it to be able to understand the warning signs of when people are starting to do these things. But no matter what you're diving into, it's like you have to dive into the light side and the good side, the light side and the bad side of it, to have the broader understanding of all of it. So, I mean, even, going into, like awful experiences that people have had through their life. Like, if you didn't go through this awful experience, then you wouldn't be the person that you are today. So it's like, again, you have to have this duality of things that, to understand the light, you have to understand the dark, and vice versa. To understand the dark, you also have to understand the light.
Right. I mean, the best way to learn psychology is to talk to a bunch of fucked up people on the internet. Literally just join any Discord server, call them, and just fucking ask them questions, and you'll see like they do fucked up shit. Like, I had this one guy who told me about his experience where he caught his dad masturbating, and how that affected his entire life, where he thought that his father was an emasculated loser, and the only male role model was his mother, who was constantly degrading him. And so he had trouble dating women, became an incel. So, like, if you really want to learn psychology, to just talk to fucked up people. And that's the best way to learn it, right? That experience of listening to people of their fucked up traumatic stuff is what makes you a better psychologist, right?
Inquiries About Reality will return after this quick commercial break. And now back to the show.
I had one of my friends who went through a breakup recently. He looked through his ex-girlfriend's diary because she forgot it. He was like, honestly, like, she deserved it because she cheated on him. So morally, I don't, if you betray someone's trust, don't expect that same trust, right? So he looked through her diary, and one of the things he saw is one of her fantasies was that she always imagined herself as a strong man who would abuse a little girl, right, while she was having sex with her boyfriend. And that sounds fucked up, but that is actually very common. A lot of women have that. I mean, there's one rape fantasy that women have where they want to be raped, right? But the real rape fantasy is where they imagine themselves as the guy who's raping them, raping another girl, right? And sounds fucked up, sounds crazy, sounds like I'm a pervert. I'm not. This is just the experience that I got from talking to many different people, including women, and obviously the diary entry.
I mean, that's psychology at its finest, though, is that if you feel like you're repressed, your fantasy is going to be the complete opposite of that. I mean,
right.
Having a root understanding of psychology, like, it completely makes sense. Like, if you're the opposing force, you're going to fantasize being the opposite. It's always going to play that way. Like, typically, overall, like, females are usually the ones that get the raw end of the stick, I guess, when it comes to all of the sexual stuff. A guy gets kidnapped and his worst fear is getting killed. A girl gets kidnapped and her worst fear is being sexually assaulted. So in turn, it's like there's always this subconscious thing about girls wishing that they could be this like power, which I think is also a huge reason why a lot of girls listen to like true crime documentaries. Like, you'll have this like super light, fluffy girl, and then she sits here listening to this stuff about people getting murdered and stuff like that. It's this whole concept about spending most of your life not feeling like you have power, so you subconsciously think about having power, and in turn, even like listening to the serial killer stuff, it's a matter of like power, because girls are subconsciously listening to this and saying, if I got attacked, this is what I would do in this situation. So it gives them that higher ground, that moment of feeling like they're in control and they get the power of it. I've talked to a lot of women about this thing too, and it's always this subconscious thing with a lot of women about having power. It's a subconscious fantasy.
Well, it's also the fact that women cannot.
It's the flip for guys too, just to throw that in there, because there's a lot of guys nowadays that have the fantasy of the opposite, and not to get too in depth with it, but there's a huge phenomenon with a lot of guys having a fantasy about getting pegged by a woman. So it's again this reversal flip flop thing. Like, you fantasize about the opposite,
That's mostly manufactured though. Back to the woman thing, like, That's why pro tip, golf girls aren't actually the ones who have the fucked up ones, but it's the one who has the pink girly dress in the pink room who has the most fucked up fantasies. Just keep that in mind next time you date a golf chick and she pretends to be like fucked up. She's not.
Yeah,
she's really innocent.
I'll say you look at all the goth girls and they got a bunch of pictures of kittens and all that kind of stuff on their phones. Then you find like the pink little ooh girl, and then she has like all these like crime scene photos and stuff on her phone.
Like a whole altar. She's like a whole altar there that's just like dedicated to these serial killers, and she's like, oh my god, they're my idols, and you're like, what the fuck did I just walk into? You know,
you walk in and you're like, all right, I guess I'm not going to drink anything in this house.
You know what? I gotta go. I had like an important appointment. I really gotta like, oh, but it's like 11 p.m. Yeah, exactly. I really gotta go now.
Next thing you know, you get a drill to the back of the head.
Nice. Yeah.
Stay with me forever. Exactly. Let's try some acid and hot water.
she just fucking ties you up to some weird to her bedposts, and now you're a little doggy slave. You know, she hides in her basement. Not saying this happened to me. I'm just saying like
that's always a fear in the back of your mind of having a one night stand, man. Like everybody wants to get handcuffed, but those one night stands, man, like it might be your last.
Everybody wants to get handcuffed until the handcuffs show up. You know, then you start getting second thoughts. So getting second thoughts after this, you know. But yeah, that's like golf chicks acting all hardcore. Not true. Don't believe it, guys. It's not true. It's all an act. She's actually really sweet inside, and she just wants to be held. The pink girly one, don't trust that one. Back to my previous point. One of the things why do women have this rape fantasy is actually because, unlike men, they don't have a phallus, they don't have a penis. So they can only enjoy through outside perception, right? So a lot of women, they actually always ask their friend group if something is okay or not. Whereas guys, guys usually, and they ask their friend group too, but usually they think about it first, right? They keep holding their thoughts first before they start talking to their friends. Whereas girls immediately they want to know, like, so if we're dating any guy, one of the things that she does is she asks her girlfriends, "Hey, what do you think of this guy?" Right? And she's not going to date you if her friend group doesn't approve of you. So, but why is that the case? And why does she imagine herself to be this big burly man who rapes a small girl? Is because she herself, she doesn't have a phallus, she doesn't have a penis, she doesn't know what self-enjoyment looks like. Right? She can only figure it out through that outside perception, right? And so one of the things that women do suffer from is that penis jealousy, where it's to say, they think that as a man, you have all the enjoyment in the world and your penis is always hard. And you're constantly like, you can always just touch it. And just by touching it, you're just in a blissful state. Right. And that's where all that resentment towards men oftentimes comes from. Right. Because they think that that's how a penis works. That it's a symbol of power. It's a symbol of thrust. But the thing is, a penis isn't always hard. I mean, any guy knows that we don't always perform well during sex. And when we do, it's like one time, and then we need like at least 20 minutes or 30 minutes if you're older. So it's not like that we constantly enjoy ourselves. It's actually and it's not that we constantly have power. Power is something that's, first of all, that's virtual, that's perceived. And second of all, it's not always there. You're not always hard, That's what makes power so powerful, is because the fact that it's not always there. That's in its absence, it's perceived as a bigger threat, right? Or as of higher value. But women don't understand that, right? Because the only conception they have through a penis is always in its hardened state, because that's the only time you have sex with a woman, right? And that's why they have that fantasy, because they're like, well, I want to enjoy myself too. I want to have that enjoyment too. So I'm just going to imagine myself that I have this big throbbing penis that's just violating this little girl. Because she thinks that by having that, she's able to enjoy herself. Right? And so that's really where that rape fantasy stems from. Right? She herself, she doesn't have a phallus. And so she needs to project herself onto someone who does have a phallus. And why not have it be someone who is strong and threatening? Right? Might as well make the most out of it.
Stay tuned, guys. This is our last break. But if you enjoyed the show and you think I deserve it, then please leave a review or rating for this show on iTunes, Spotify, or any other podcatcher you happen to use. Your continued support is what makes this show possible, and your opinions go a long way to help the show grow and improve. So thank you. Now feel free to skip past these ads so we can get back to the show. And we are back, so let's get back to it. So, I guess kind of ending it on a bit of a dark note, but on the flip side of it, I always like to end the show with some words of wisdom. So to kind of maybe bring stuff to a little bit of a high note, man, what might your words of wisdom be that you want to bestow on the listeners today?
I guess words of wisdom would be like, I have two words of wisdoms, actually. The first one would obviously to stick to the topic, which is to say the economy is fucked. The economy is fucked. And the only way you can really make the most out of it is by committing economic arbitrage. Go to a different country, just use that better currency to really make the most, get this middle class life that you deserve, that you've been robbed of, right? Is it the most moral thing? No, it's not. But what other options do you have? It's either that or you live in poverty. So go commit economic arbitrage, go to a different country, move to get a remote job, live this expat lifestyle if you can, right? If you can't, just try to sort of find these tax loopholes to really not pay your government any more of your cents that they're using to fuck you over, right? And don't believe golf chicks. They're not real.
They're only something to see on the internet. They're like a unicorn, man.
They're feds. It's a fed operation.
Everybody goes missing after they date a goth girl.
Exactly. That's why they're trying to convince you that pegging is normal. It's because this fed, he just wants to peg you with his pecker.
True power right there.
Yeah.
That's how it goes in the hierarchy, right? That the alpha rapes the beta.
The more peckers, the more pegging you get to convince, the higher your pay raise. It's like that. That's how they measure their success. Convince another guy that pegging is normal.
One additional decimal per peg.
Exactly.
And if anybody wanted to dive into all of this super deep philosophical / psychological stuff that we've been talking about, or if they want to contact you for any reason whatsoever, man, where can they find the book? And where might they be able to contact you? And if you have a social media presence for the book, where might people be able to find that at also? All
right. It's thepillowsofwisdom.com. Thepillowsofwisdom.com. That's where you can find the book. It's on Shopify as well. Again, The Pillows of Wisdom. Our social media, again, The Pillows of Wisdom. You can find us on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and Substack. We're on Substack too. So if you're interested in spicy articles and spicy memes, that's where you can find them. But really, just get the book, man. Just get the book. You'll see it's worth your time. It's really worth it, and it's written in such an easy language that you can just read it every night without really thinking about it too hard, right? So
I can vouch for that too. It's a beautiful book, and even for anybody that just likes collecting books on philosophy and all that type of stuff, it's a beautiful book to have in your collection, regardless. It's got some awesome information in it and a lot of really, really cool illustrations, and not trying to sit here and like upsell it or nothing like that, but it is a beautifully made book.
Yeah, we put a lot of effort into it. We put a lot of effort into it so that people can have the best experience, so they can actually feel like this is a real luxury good that I'm holding in my hands.
Straight from Greece, so you can say it's imported.
Straight from Greece, exactly, where philosophy comes from.
It's a sign, man.
Exactly, it is a sign. Just rubbing the back of my Greek brethren there, so they can feel even more proud.
And on a side note, man, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Really looking forward to what we're going to dive into next time. And just to add this in for a little bit at the end, just to sprinkle a little bit of a teaser. I know that you said you already kind of have the next few shows that you want to do somewhat planned out. So without giving anything away, if you just want to give them a really, really quick teaser on what we might be diving into on the next episode.
Yeah, just let me check real quick the list that I prepared for you, because I'm so busy. My brain can only do so much. I think what we were going to talk about next time was, if I remember correctly, I have it here. Yeah, escaping castrated space. So basically, you're in this castrated space, the economy is fucked, and then you have people who fuck you over too. How do you escape that castrated space? How do you get out of it, right? Like, that's
perfect.
sort of like
laying the breadcrumbs down, man. If you listen to this conversation, you're definitely going to have to come back for that one. So again, man, always an absolute pleasure. And to the listeners out there, make sure that you guys tune back in, hopefully within the next month or so, for Pillars of Wisdom, Part 3.
Exactly.
If you enjoyed today's conversation and want to show some love, smash that follow icon and share today's episode with a friend. Grassroots support from listeners like you is exactly how this show grows. So thank you. And if anyone would like to get in touch with me for any reason whatsoever, you guys can get a hold of me through email, which is inquiriesofourrealitypodcast@outlook.com, or you can get a hold of me through social media. Instagram and Facebook are the ones that I'm the most active on. Or you guys can also get a hold of me through the submission form, and of course that is available on the top of the link tree. And the last way you guys can get a hold of me is through the hotline number. You guys can text or call that, whatever happens to be easier, and that number is 313-364-1551. And that's also available down in the show notes so that you guys can find it quick and easy. And if you guys got some free time, don't forget to check out the awesome friends of the show, I Know Squatch, Snelly on Natural Products, Cryptotheology, and Big Ape Threads, and our friends with affiliate links, Dimension Devices, Oregon-ite, and Mule, with additional discounts and credits available. More information on those, of course, is available down in the show notes. And every single thing that I mentioned throughout the show is all available in the link tree, which again is also available down in those show notes. And with that, hope you guys enjoyed today's conversation. Hope today's show has connected some dots in your own reality. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Have a good night, everybody.
Reality isn't what it seems. Abductees taking aboard a craft with a tractor beam. Is life a simulation or an astral dream? Aliens travel through black holes in different galaxies. Life is a bizarre odyssey, with a mic talking about philosophy. Well, Bigfoot is stalking campers as a Wendigo walks through the woods of sharpened antlers, using a Ouija board to talk to the dead like a necromancer. There's so many questions and not enough answers. So if you're interested in mysteries and abnormalities, tune in and listen.